David Hill, the brainchild of what we know now as Fox Sports, formerly the president of Fox Sports, then turned chairman of the Fox Network, then chairman of Fox Sports Media Group, worked with 21st Century Fox, and the accolades and honors, they continue to roll in. He joins me today and on the Onto Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, a national anchor for Fox Sports Radio. Of course, David, 4 networks he created in 3 different continents. And we're going to look at his life. We're going to look at his career, what makes him inspirational, and what happened to his mullet. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. I do want to stay. Oh, he still has a little bit. There's a little bit there.
No, it's up there on head week. That's where I keep it.
Yes.
How are you, Bryan? Let's go.
David, I'm excited to do this. One of the things that I totally wanted to start out with here in this conversation is a lot of the things that you have done in television have been mimicked, have been copied, whether it's the Fox box, everything else that you've done as far as your innovative ideas. But what about David Hill can they not replicate?
The bad jokes. I pepper my children on a daily basis with really, really bad jokes, and I'm still mourning the death of Norm Macdonald. I think that Norm Macdonald as one of the purveyors of the Shaggy Dog story was probably better than anyone else, and his death had a profound effect on me. But I'm getting over it.
What has it been like for you in processing that and the grief that came because of it?
Well, thank God for Facebook, because I have found on Facebook an endless source of Norm Macdonald stories.
Oh.
And my favorite one is the one about the youthful purpose. And I won't bore your listeners. I can actually hear computers being clicked off all over the country as we get into this. So,
stop it.
God. Right.
Yeah. So one of the things that our mutual friend and Michael Del Tufo, he posted this video or this photo of the Fox control room rules. And there was 3 bullet points: assume nothing, less is more, and be cool. You were certainly behind those 3 tenets. Why those 3 tenets?
Well, it's like I started in television when I was 19. I walked into my first control room. I'd been a newspaper journalist for a couple of years before that. So television has been, I've done absolutely nothing else. I barely made it through high school and went straight to work as a copy boy, became a journalist, and then moved into TV. So for all these decades, all I've ever done is television. So it started in doing news in front of and behind the camera. Moved into production when I was 27, 28. I did my first big live show. I was 29. And then I started doing live sports when I was 31. And so during that period, I had some of the best training from pros. And I grew up in Australia, as probably those of you who got a keen ear have already worked that out. And the one thing I've found about television is that it doesn't matter what the accent is or the language. Television people are all exactly the same. So I worked with a bunch of guys, notably a director called Bryan Morelli, who taught me the key thing was trust and respect, and that you had to earn the trust and respect of everyone in the control room, because you could write the greatest show on the history of the planet, but if the A2 didn't realize to open mic number 9 at 23 minutes and 7 seconds and understand why he was doing that and hit it with a sound effect, that it was all gone. So that you had to get that trust and respect. And so I carried that through Australia, and then when I went to Britain and we started Sky, and when I came to the States in '94 to start Fox Sports, that I suddenly realized when I walked into the control room when we were rehearsing that there was an incredible level of tension.
Oh.
In the people. And like I had my head up my ass. Like I was so terrified for 6 months. Like I arrived January, I think the 7th, 1994, and I was given an IBM Selectric typewriter, which I still love, by the way. I wish I still had it. 2 yellow legal pads, a couple of pencils, and that was it. And I had to get it up and running. We had to be on air by August. And so when you're working at that pace, and there wasn't even a logo, there wasn't any crew, there wasn't offices, there was nothing. There was no engineering infrastructure. So thank God for Kenny Agar and Jeff Mason, who I rapidly grabbed and used their brains to get that going. But when we actually started doing it, and Bobby Levy was directing, Scott Ackerson was producing, but I could tell that everyone, the guys on Chiron, Jonathan X was TD. There was this level of tension, and that kills good production. That as soon as you start to get tense. So my 3 rules have always been exactly that. Number 1, less is more. Television is essentially a very, very simple project. It's 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, get the end result. And if you try and screw it up, that it doesn't work. So less is more. Obviously, to be cool, and I just wanted to let everyone know. And I stood there. I think I gave many speeches in that control room down the bottom end of Sunset when we set up about it's to be cool. It's kind of like I'd had long conversations with Jimmy Johnson, and I said to Jimmy, how do you prepare your players like for Super Bowl? He said it was very simple. He said I'd get a plank of wood about 6 inches wide and about 8 foot long, and he said I'd put it in whatever hotel we were in, and I'd say to all the team, walk along this bench. So they would all walk along this plank, and I'd have them go out of the room, and then I'd put it on top of a ladder 10 feet up. I said, right, walk along that plank. And they go, we can't, we're scared. He said, you've just done it. So it's exactly like you're going to be playing tomorrow. You're going to do exactly what you played. Doesn't matter that you're in the Super Bowl. So that's what I was trying in my not nearly as articulate or not nearly as effective as Jimmy Johnson, to say to the guys and girls that you have to be cool and be yourself and let your natural ability flow and not be tight. And the key law in television, number 3, and I think I've still got it somewhere on my desk.
Yeah.
That one of my kids. No, I've got a little plaque, and it says, assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups.
Yes.
That to me is the golden rule in life and television, what have you. So the 3 rules are very simple. Less is more, be cool, and assume nothing. And that, I put that up at the, no, I didn't put that up at the start. I put that up like maybe 2 years later. There'd been some total cock-up in the control room, and it was like a train wreck on air. And it was because those 3 rules have been broken. Someone assumed something, someone got too tight, and they were trying to do too much. So I said, right, these are the laws. This is the essence of good television. Those 3 simple things.
David Hill is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. So you say less is more, but why during your career at Fox was more of Scott Ackerson a good thing?
Well,
I love Scott.
I think that I think everyone should experience Scott Ackerson. I think that I was doing the world a favor in plucking him, kicking and screaming out of the wilderness of Bristol and bringing him to Los Angeles. And the last I heard, that Mr. Ackerson and Kath are living very happily out in the desert. And if you see his name appear on the next list of senior championship players, don't be surprised. I think he's down to like 1 or 2 at the moment. So Scotty is amazing. Scotty always was amazing from day one. He wasn't our first choice as producer, but he settled into the slot, put us on air, and then handled it like a master from then on in. He can juggle things in his head. He trained Bill Richardson, or Bill Richards. I beg your pardon, Bill, if you're watching. Probably knowing Bill, he's turned off after the first 3 minutes and he'll be bored sitting in his drum kit doing something. He trained Bill, and he trained so many people, so many kids that worked on Fox NFL Sunday.
Obviously, Fox NFL Sunday was such a big part of who you were and what you've done.
It was vital. It was absolutely vital. What I knew, I didn't know anything about American football. Like, I'm an Australian out of London producing NFL football, and what I knew about NFL football, you could write on the back of a stamp. There was a critic, one of many at that stage, I might add, up in Boston, who said that David Hill wouldn't know if football is puffed or stuffed. And I wrote him a letter and said, "You're absolutely right, pal, 100%. Way to go." Yeah, I don't know. So it was. I'm sorry, I blanked. Then I'm on. I was thinking about.
On football, and that you didn't know because you're from Australia, that you didn't know football, American football, as well as some people thought.
So, but I did know one key thing: that a game is a game is a game.
Yeah.
And as far as the public is concerned, and I had a particular member of the public in mind. His name's Wilbur Bakey, and is my father-in-law, and he lives in Omaha, Nebraska. Because when it was announced that Fox got the NFL, Wilbur rang me and said, "We don't get Fox here on our cable system, David. What are you doing?" I said, "Wilbur, don't worry. By the time the season comes around, you'll have it." So a game is a game is a game. And it depends on your announce team, and it depends on your producer director, and it depends on your graphics and how you package it, whatever. But the key thing, the personality, is your pre and post game show. And I knew that we would be graded on our coverage. We would be graded on our coverage, and our brand would depend on how well we did the coverage. But I wasn't that worried about the coverage. I figured that we'd get that. What I was worried about was creating a new form of sports show, one that used humor and used every single entertainment effect that I could use on our pregame show. And the one thing I was told by all the wise people at Fox back in January '94 was the one person I shouldn't hire was Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw is an idiot. I don't know what he's doing on CBS. I like, if Terry Bradshaw stood up my porridge, I wouldn't have a clue who he was, right? So fortunately, by sheer God-given fortune, I happened to be watching CBS pregame show on the NFC Championship. And so I thought, there's that guy, Terry Bradshaw, that everyone reckons is an idiot. And Terry, and I'm watching, yeah, okay. He's okay, it's good. Greg Gumbel's good, like Greg. And then he got up from the desk and he walked across, but he didn't walk. He strutted. He had this kind of like, "I'm Terry Bradshaw and you're not." And I fucking loved that. So I couldn't wait to get on the phone and grab him. And in effect, I built the whole Fox Sports around Terry. Wow. And the reason Terry was so vitally important to me and to what I was building was that he had the knowledge, he had this wonderful self-deprecating humor, and he could get his message across, and he could teach. And I've fallen in love with him. Like, we've worked together closely for 25 years, and I think he is absolutely wonderful. And what he did for me and for Fox Sports was to create like a center load. He is, Fox Sports is Terry Bradshaw. Wow. And a bit of me.
And a bit of you. Let's not forget about that, David.
The difference that I brought to the show, and perhaps it was why Mr. Murdoch asked me to leave Sky Sports in England. I was having a blast. That we'd got the Premier League, and my dad worked in when he left the coal mine, he worked in a steel mill, and he was a semi-pro soccer player. So I grew up kind of like playing rugby, but addicted to soccer. So getting the Premier League and covering soccer was just fabulous. Sorry, football was fabulous, and then to come out here. But I'm not a fan, and this is going to sound really weird. I'm not a fan in the normal sense of the word. I've never paid until I was like 26 to go to watch a sports event. I watched it on TV, listened to it on radio, but never went. So to me, sports was always entertainment. And what I discovered when I arrived here was that the networks were treating it like a requiem mass. Everything was very solemn. And I didn't see sports that way at all. I see it as like the greatest reality show of all time. And I've said often that the great thing about sports is the guy with a white hat doesn't always get to kiss the horse. And it's like, so me treating sports as entertainment, as pure entertainment, and then add into that Terry Bradshaw's irreverence, humor, knowledge, and experience, and then you layer in Howie Long, like Mr. America, and then you layer in Jimmy Johnson with rings as a champion, national champion player, national champion coach, Super Bowl winning coach, boom, boom, boom. You put those three together, and then I got James Brown, who was like just the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. And so the four of them created what was seen as and what became Fox Sports.
Eventually, and Kurt Menefee would come in, and James Brown obviously would head to CBS. But when I think about you and what you've done and how you built up Fox, and as far as this NFL coverage, you've been open about this, David. There was a lot of pushback. Your style, the entertaining, the fun style, the things that came, and people were pushing back at you, the traditionalists.
Oh yeah.
Why? But why, David? Despite all the pressure around you, did you stay true to yourself? And what sort of inner strength did that take during those early formative moments to be like that?
Let me tell you about Kurt Menefee. It was actually really good for us. I don't think I've ever said this before. It was really good for us that JB left to go to CBS. I've been tracking Kurt Menefee. He worked at Dallas, and then I think one of the smartest producers I've ever known, a woman called Lisa Gregorish, who now produces Extra. And she's, I never say this publicly, don't anyone tell, but she is absolutely brilliant. And she went to run WNYW's news in New York, and we'd talk often. And she said, "You remember that kid I was telling you about, Kurt Menefee, from Dallas?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I brought him up here." She said, "Do you know how quickly he can write a script?" I said, "Really?" And she and I would talk about Kurt, and Kurt was getting, and she'd send me clips of Kurt. And Kurt was getting better and better and better doing WNYW. And then it all just worked, that JB decided he wanted to spend more time. He lived in DC. Kurt wanted to come to LA, and it was perfect. And Kurt, boom, Kurt's a journo. So that combination just has worked perfectly.
That combination has. And then let's get to something that I revere about you and admire most, is how no matter the pushback in your ideas, you stay true to yourself. And I know that when you were first introducing new concepts into the broadcasting mold, there was a lot of pushback, and some people could have caved in. How were you able to be so strong during those moments and realize that you knew what was going on and what was best?
I identified a long time ago an inherent problem that I have, and I've christened it the worm of self-doubt. And the worm of self-doubt goes like this. Because you're having breakfast, or you're taking a shower, or you're driving to work, and you get this idea, and you think, "Jesus, that's a good idea. That, God, if I do that and I do that, that'll work out, right?" And then car goes on, you finish you finish a bowl of cereal, and then you think, well, God, no, if I say that, people are going to laugh at it. And then you get in the car or you get in the train and you go to work, and by the time you convince yourself it's the dumbest idea there's ever been in the world. And so once I realized that this was happening to me, and I get a lot of ideas, most of them are totally useless. I had a boss, a guy called Sam Chisholm, who I loathe, and he used to say, the one thing about David Hill is that he'll get 100 ideas, 98 of which are shit. And I said, you know what, Sam, you're 100% correct, pal. So it's that when you get an idea, you've got to turn around and turn around and turn around and kind of look at it. I had a fantastic boss, a guy called Peter Chernin, and I got to the stage where if I had an idea that involved me kind of like begging for money to invest in something, I'd go up to see Peter and I'd lay it out, and it got to the stage where I get so pissed off because he'd see things that I didn't, and I'd send a week, and I would sit and ponder upon it, and then I'd go up and I'd say, right, Peter, this is what I want to do, da 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 da, and he'd always say, well, you've obviously thought of this, and this is going to be a dumb idea, but what about so and so? And you go, you're right. Now I tell you what he did with that we discovered that our rating at the end of the football would take it up to a common junction, right? If a game finished at 7:20, would go through to 7:30. If the game finished 7:35, have to take it through to 8 o'clock for the network. And I was saying to Peter, we're just sitting having one of our weekly chats, that the ratings that we were getting even for that post-game show were huge. And he said, you know, if you created another show that you could sell those commercials and it'd be a huge revenue center. And I thought, why didn't I think of that? So at my staff meeting, I said, listen, Chernin's got this fantastic idea. And a young director, I think it was Derek, I can't, there was a show on Fox called The OC.
Oh, sure.
And he said, what? Let's call it The OT. And I go, brilliant. So that was, so the next week we created this new show, we sold it. So it was a whole different revenue stream for us. And if you, to this day, if you look in the list of the top 10 television shows, the OT pops up every second week when Fox has a double header, which was like I'd identified something, but Peter then was able to take it and make it better. So it's kind of like having a boss that is prepared to ride with you on ideas, and then making sure that you look at it from, it's like a cube, and you got to look at it to see if there's any flaws. And I never introduced anything until I'd thought it through, until I'd played devil advocate myself. Ed Goren was a very good devil's advocate, and that he and I would sit and talk for ages about any innovation. The only time we didn't talk was when I pulled down all the top shots of the offensive line and the defensive line at the start of the game. And he had a small connection then, as did Sports Illustrated, but it seems to have worked.
Where, and we're joined by David Hill, I'm Bryan Fenley, did the Fox Sports jingle leading into the coverage that's infamous, that gets you pumped up?
Oh, Scotty Schrader.
What role did you play in that?
Well, here's the deal. One of my first hires was this brilliant guy called Georgie Greenberg, and George was kind of like the creative brains of ABC Sports. And back then I had a great friend, Jeff Mason, still do actually. And when I was in Britain, I'd get Jeff to send me the promos that George was making for ABC Sports. And I won't say I stole his ideas. Let's say I researched his ideas. But no one else's work evagorized. That's a little Tom Lehrer, Nikolai Ivanovich, and for students of very bizarre humor, you'll recognize it. Most of you won't. Don't worry. So one of the first people I tried to hire, which I did, was George. And when I was trying to find him, George was across in London with the London Philharmonic doing a theme, I think, for I think he did the theme for the original Monday Night Football, whatever, George's Genius. And he had a mate called Scott Schreer who had a company called Not Just Jingles. And George said, well, we've got to get a theme. We've got to get a theme. And I said, it hasn't come yet. And I've written a bit of music in the past, and I've played in a band, which is why I have no education whatsoever. But I had a lot of fun. And so I didn't know what to do. And there was nothing. And all the themes that I heard sounded like police chases on crack, and I didn't like them. And one of the things that I've done with all my kids is I love roller coasters. I love roller coasters. So I've inflicted on all my kids roller coasters. And they'd put in a new one, the Batman ride up at Six Flags, just up the 5. And so it was like July, and it was baking hot, and I'd had it. And I said to Jules, come on. And he was then 13, 14, and he was going to school here. I said, we're going to ride this new Batman ride. So we went up there, and I'd heard and I'd seen the Batman movie, and it was all gothic, and Hans Zimmer, I think, wrote it. And I didn't like it because I'd been brought up on the Batman thing that went da 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 Batman. And so we're moving forward in this line that went dong dong dong, and we go through this faux village of Gotham, and they're playing the theme, and I listen. God, that's in a minor key. Interesting. And then I started listening more and more to it because they just kept playing it over and over again. So I'm stuck. Jules is going off to get frozen, kind of like frozen stuff, because it was so
Oh yeah.
friggin' hot. And again, and I thought, God, this piece of music is brilliant. So I called George. I got back home. These are long before the days of cell phones. I called George and I said, hey, you know your mate Scotty Schreer? He said, yeah. I said, go out and listen to the Batman theme, the complexity of it, and tell him that the theme I want for Fox Sports is Batman's got a football team. Wow. So it's that genre. That's the genre that I want. Not the theme. I don't want the Batman theme, but I want that genre. I want that sound. So 2 weeks later, George says he's got it. So I go to New York, and we sit down, and Scotty's got 2 tracks. And so he plays me track 1, then he plays me track 2. And I say, right, you've got take the first 32 bars, stick that on track 2 from track 1, middle 32, last 32, and you've got it. And so he did that on his computer. And I listened to it and said, that's it. And so we recorded it in Salt Lake City, had it on air the next weekend, and it's been effectively the same. And then over the years, and I love working with Scotty, that he would do variations on a theme for baseball. And the best thing he ever did for me was when we got the NHL. And I'd seen a band called Stomp, again, with Jules, which is this percussion English band that absolutely brilliant. So I said to Scotty, could you build a rhythm track from the sounds of skating, like, and so we sent a couple of sound recorders, sound engineers, and we recorded the audio from the ice rink from a hockey game, and he built the rhythm track for our hockey out of the fact, and it was quite brilliant. It was like absolutely brilliant. And it was so good. I actually stole that idea when I was doing audio for the sound mix for Formula One. I've just finished working with Formula One for 3 years, and it needed a theme. So Bryan Tyler, who I got to write the theme, the chorus, if you ever listen to a Formula One, which is on ESPN, that the chorus that you can hear in the opening theme is actually the sound of a V8 engine that Bryan, who is a maniac and brilliant, mixed so it sounds like a human choir, but it's actually an articulated V8 engine. And that idea came from Scotty Schreer in, I think, 96 with the rhythm track for the Fox NHL theme.
My goodness, that is a really neat insight into something that, look, I think a lot of people had no idea. And I know we're tight for time.
No, they should, Brian. No, they should. That television is a mix of audio, sounds, but the key thing is emotion. And what a theme does, and what Scotty Schreier is so clever about, is that he can capture the emotion of what you're expecting to see in a few seconds. Like as soon as you hear da 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 da, what is it? It's football. And there's a whole, what I'm so proud about, and Scotty is too, like I saw him when I was in New York 2 weeks ago, that a whole generation of kids have heard that theme, and that means football on Fox. And like as far as Scotty's concerned, it's like, to me, this is going to sound stupid, but it's up there with Mozart, and it's like it's an iconic theme that I reckon will last for another 50 years.
Yeah, no question about it. And I've got some, I know you're tight for time, but I would love to do this again with you because I have some fascinating other insights that I wanted to throw your way as far as questions. So I super appreciate you, David,
No,
and what you were able to talk about today. And I am really grateful for your time. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Bryan Fenley, and your storytelling skills, Hall of Fame worthy.
But that's all, Brian. That's what the job is. We
Yes.
are the linear descendants of a caveman who's standing up there and said, Zog killed the dinosaur and dragged it in. And we tell stories of heroes. And that's what we do in sports. And so, unless you can tell a story, unless you can have a beginning, a middle, and an end, unless you can mix it in with emotion and love and with as much skill as you can, you should be working in Starbucks.
Well, thank you for letting me tell your story, you being the hero.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay. Okay.
David Hill, I'm Bryan Fenley. Appreciate you so much.
See you, man.